No event has affected our world, especially the Middle East, more than 9/11. But all the major players in this event have received obvious cover from the governments, academics, and of course, the mainstream media.
Was it a false flag attack? And if so, who did it?
Well, there's just no question for those of us who are thinking the idea that these 19 hijackers led by a man in a cave in Afghanistan with
some of whom are still alive.
Yes, indeed. And the lead hijacker being Mohammed Atta, who was snorting cocaine, drinking booze, and hanging out with strippers.
Fly a plane in a million years.
I mean, it's such an insult. It's beggars belief that anyone bought that in the first place. It is indeed a false flag operation. The people that I would say we have absolute proof, beyond a doubt, which really indicts certain characters, and I think is very little talked about, is the purchase of the lease of the Twin Towers in the first place by Larry Silverstein and Frank Lowy. Now, these two billionaire Jewish businessmen bought buildings which financially were nothing but a liability. They were full of asbestos. They were full of asbestos. It had already been well documented that the cost of extracting the asbestos was in the billions. You couldn't just destroy the buildings because, of course, the buildings coming down would just release asbestos all throughout New York. So actually buying those buildings where it was publicly known that the cost of removing the asbestos was far more than any value.
More than the replacement cost, I believe.
Never mind the fact that half of the buildings were empty anyway. It was a dinosaur. It was a financial liability. And yet, two Jewish billionaires bought the lease on this. And then within 6 weeks, lo and behold, the buildings come down. And oh, by the way, in that period of 6 weeks, we doubled the insurance policy. If that was a Muslim, if it wasn't Larry Silverstein, if it was Mohammed, who was a Muslim who did that, we would all know about it, and it would be obvious. No way would a Jewish billionaire businessman who's made billions in business buy a building that's a financial liability. He must have known, and of course he has direct contacts to his friend Netanyahu, war criminal that he is, and Jewish Zionist interests that have every kind of reason.
You mentioned the empty floors on the buildings, and there's no doubt that some of the floors were sealed in the weeks beforehand, and there were workers going in and out. And nobody never knows what they were up to.
Mossad front companies, Mossad agents that were caught on the day, some with explosives in vans. We can go on and on and on and on. It wasn't purely Israel. It wasn't purely. There were traitors in the U.S. as well.
Well, the attack on 9/11, 2001 on the New York World Trade Center, instigated by Mossad. That report, by the way, never told the truth. It never ever mentioned the collapse of Tower number 7, which wasn't even touched by an aeroplane.
Sir, I asked you if you could address some of the 9/11 conspiracy theories that you are accused of. Sadly, your response has actually invited more of them. I mean, for the record, everybody knows your infamous comments on PBS where you said pull Building 7 on 5/25 on the day of 9/11.
They were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Your official response was that it was the firefighters. My question is, it was pretty clear that you meant the building, and if it was the firefighters, they already are outside the building by 12 because the water lines were broken.
Ask the question.
And the fire chief that you said you spoke to, Fire Chief Negro, denies talking to you on that day of 9/11. Can you answer those questions and address the theories against you?
I suggest, for everybody's consideration, that we all look at the thousands of pages of testimony that have been rendered in the many years since 9/11, and let's use today's session for something that's...
Are you aware of testimony of bombs in the building before the building collapsed, sir? Are you aware of that testimony? Sir, there's testimony by Barry Jennings. Sir, you don't have to touch me. Listen, I'll walk away. All I'm asking is a question. I don't have to be kicked out. It's a legitimate question. You don't have to put your hands on me. But all I'm saying is, no, I'm not. I'm here asking. The question was not answered. That's why I have a grievance. Larry Silverstein was told not to come into work. That's why him, his daughter, and his son never showed up to work on 9/11. He put an insurance policy on the buildings. Reporters, do your job. Please ask some questions.
It is like a tragic comedy that we as people have allowed ourselves to be conned into ignoring the mountains of evidence that indicts traitors within the U.S. government and military, as well as dual nationals, Jewish Israelis, who happen to have also advertised their desire for a, quote, new Pearl Harbor type event that would allow them to carry out a perpetual war policy for reasons of greed and power. Wrapped up in a blanket of patriotism, of course. Whether you knew any of this or not, It has been hidden in plain sight.